Hello, and welcome to the Defence Rests. I'm Jodie, and having recently covered the Ashley Bannifield trial, or the Black Swan trial as it's commonly known, I didn't realise how affected I would be. Now, Ashley Bannifield, if you haven't seen it, was on trial for shooting her husband fatally. Now, she is claiming that it was done in self-defence because he had been physically violent with her that day and had experienced domestic violence throughout their entire marriage. However, on that particular day, the violence had escalated to become physical, and so she had retaliated in that way and was claiming self-defence in her trial. Now, there's a few things that angered me about this particular trial. One of them was that it didn't seem to me that many people were aware or recognised some of the signs of domestic violence, because they can be quite subtle and they can be quite obvious as well. It's one of those things that has a very, very broad spectrum. And it triggered a lot of memories for me as well. It brought back quite a few, having been a victim of domestic violence myself. So I thought it important that I bring up this topic, because it's not a topic that everyone likes to hear about, and it's not a topic that everyone likes to talk about, but it is something that is a fundamental problem in our society, and it exists more prevalently than we want to admit. And if you can detect the signs early on in someone that you love, then you may be able to help them. And any help is good help, because the system let Ashley down very much. And if you would like to watch that trial, I have linked the whole playlist of the trial in the description box below. So firstly, let's just go through. Domestic violence is a broad term, and it encompasses an extensive range and levels of abuse. And abuse itself is a broad term, and that too encompasses an extensive range of behaviour. It's something that is experienced by victims at a frequency that we don't want to accept, because it is more prevalent out there than we want to believe. It's not limited by race, colour, creed, economic status, gender, or location. It presents itself in multiple different ways, forms, from the simple subtlety of a specific glare or look, all the way through to unsurvivable injuries. Now, let me expand a little bit more on how a glare could potentially reveal a domestic violence situation. You might think that's ridiculous, but wait. Now, abusers generally like to establish control over their victims, and they do that in a few ways. So they try to coerce or elicit particular responses and behaviours from their victims that they feel are acceptable to them, and they like to establish that control. And they do that by instilling fear, mainly fear, guilt, shame, a whole gamut of things. For example, examples of controlling behaviour are restricting their movement, not letting them see who they want to see, their social interactions, controlling their demeanours and reactions, their financial situation, what they wear, and the list goes on. They can ultimately suppress a victim's entire identity and self of sense. And I think that is exactly what happened to Ashley Benefield. Now, how do they do this? Mainly fear. Fear of being harmed, fear of harm coming to others, fear of harm to pets, fear of reprisal for any behaviour exhibited that they deem is unacceptable. Now, they instill this fear directly or indirectly. They could flat out threaten you of a beating, or they could respond to your unacceptable behaviour in a manner that elicits a sense of guilt, shame, or confusion in you. By that, I mean they react in a way that makes you have concern for their well-being. So let's say you behave in a certain way, and their response elicits a reaction from you where you feel, oh my goodness, I've upset them. Something's wrong. What's going on? I need to address this. And when you do address it, it opens up the door for the abuser to build a foundation of fear and instill that in you. And every time it happens, the more often it happens, they compound those feelings of guilt and shame. Now, let me give you an example of this. You might think that's ridiculous. Okay, so let's just imagine this. You're at work and you get held up for 10, 15 minutes. You think nothing of it. So you arrive home late, only to find your significant other is completely ignoring you, or walks out of the room when you leave, or won't look at you, won't speak to you, and is keeping their distance. First thing you want to do is find out what's going on. Why? What's wrong? What's happening? So you naturally go and ask, what's going on, honey? Now, what happens if they then, I know this is probably going to be a little bit on the dramatic side, but I'm trying to explain the process and how they work, because it can be very subtle, but it can be also very obvious to them, but not necessarily to anyone else. So what happens if they instantly burst into tears and become extremely emotional and tell you that they were so worried about you, that you were in trouble and something had happened to you, that they felt helpless, that they weren't there to help you if something was happening and they couldn't protect you, and that, you were being selfish because you didn't let them know, you didn't say anything, you didn't inform them, and they spent all this time feeling so anxious they nearly had a panic attack. Okay? So, as I said, tad dramatic, but how does that make you feel? Guilty? Anxious? Upset? You don't want your loved one to feel like that. So what do? You feel terrible. And inside, you make that little choice in your head. Okay, I'm going to make a conscious effort now to not be late from work again. I'm going to make sure I leave 10 minutes earlier every day so this doesn't happen again. So, inadvertently, they have elicited a specific response from you that they wanted. Now, that's one example. So, if at that same time that they are so emotional and so reactive to what you have done, and they give you that look, a specific look, and every time you upset them in this way and they respond this way, they give you the same look, then down the track, that look will be directly related to that feeling and that emotion and that shame and that guilt. And it could just be that look will elicit the exact same behavior that they want. They don't need to go to all the song and dance anymore because they've established the control. So it then can get compounded on from there. So you then can get to the point where you spend half of your working day feeling anxious because you don't know how you're going to get through your work and be able to leave 10 minutes early. So your anxiety levels start to rise. And that's what they talk about when they talk about walking on eggshells, because you don't know what's going to set them off in the end. It starts off slowly. They are very, very cunning, very manipulative, and very, very good at acting, very smart and calculated. And you may not even be aware that it's happening, because you don't want to make them feel like that again. You don't want to upset them again. So you mightn't be aware of, as I said, what's going on until, hang on, next page, until you find yourself at a police station or at a courthouse or in a hospital bed. You can become so focused on how your behavior affects your abuser that you lose sight of anything else. So much so that when you're out in public together and you witness that glare, you now associate all those feelings of guilt with shame, etc., and instantly conform to whatever demands they're making. Now, to those lucky enough who've not had any experience with domestic violence, that might sound totally ridiculous to you. And surely you couldn't be so stupid or ignorant. And that's where you're wrong. I consider myself to be a strong, confident, independent, intelligent woman with an extensive level of life experience, a great deal of common sense, and what I thought was a good judge of character. And it happened to me for 7 years. To the point where I went from running my own successful business and being financially stable to being homeless with nothing to my name. Nothing. Through no fault of my own. And nobody knew until it was too late. Now, he never laid a hand on me, but I most certainly experienced domestic violence. And that's the point I'm trying to make. When I said it comes in many different forms, it's both visible and invisible. And there is different phases to it. So watching the Ashley Benefield trial, I could relate to those phases, and I could relate to the actions that she did, and I could recognize the subtleties of her behavior and recognize it for what it was. And I was pretty much ashamed of the prosecutors and how they attacked her. Their job is to present the evidence. And I felt that they bullied her and were inappropriate in dealing with her because her reactions, she totally broke down on the stand when they were cross-examining her. So, but that's me. So what I've done is I've organised, I've put together just a little set of clips from the trial, and I thought I'd go through with them, and just point out a few of the little things that I thought people missed. Okay, let's have a look.
Ashley met in 2016 at a political event. They instantly connected despite their 30-year age difference. Doug was a recently widowed father to a teenage daughter, Eva. At her stepmother's trial, Eva testified about the early days of their romance.
They were just with each other all the time.
All right. The honeymoon phase or the grooming phase. Okay. They first meet you. They are absolutely generous, loving, attentive, responsive. They don't want you to leave their side. Oh, hang on. Let's move that back. That doesn't help either. They want to be with you always, and you think that's, an endearing quality at the start. But this is their most manipulative phase. This is when they lay the foundations. Okay. This is very important to them because they establish that groundwork. So this is where they gain your complete trust and devotion and, lay that groundwork. So this is where you then start to depend and rely on them. All right, little things at a time. But that dependency and reliance grows, and that becomes another aspect of control. You are vulnerable at that time because you are being love bombed. You feel fantastic. This person is perfect. They're amazing. You feel safe in their arms. They encourage that. They want you to feel protected and safe and, complete. And so that means that you start to let your guard down and you become more vulnerable. They make you feel safe and secure and protected and loved. And that's when things start to change. And just little things at first. Let's continue watching. So that's what I'm seeing here with this statement from Doug's daughter, Eva. This is from the trial.
It was very lovey-dovey. They never left each other's side.
Doug even reversed his vasectomy so he and Ashley could have.
Okay, there's another thing right there. Now, I guarantee you, he would have reminded her constantly, look at what I did for you. Look at the lengths that I would go to for you. And what do you do for me? That is another part of establishing guilt. They make you feel like you haven't done as much or committed as much or contributed as much to the relationship as they have. And there adds the guilt and the shame. And then you try even harder to conform because you want it to work. This person that you love, you don't want to fail. It's another part of shame. You want things to work. You want to be successful. This man that you think, or this woman that you think, because it's not gender specific, is the be all and end all. You don't want to make them feel bad. So in a lot of cases, the term of domestic violence is often equated to the abuser using physical aggression towards their victim. However, the truth of the matter is that it also exists just beneath the surface of visibility to the naked eye. Emotional and psychological abuse is just as damaging, if not more so, than physical abuse. It hides underneath the layers of guilt and helplessness. It lurks beneath the barriers of denial and shame and is covered by the blankets of fear and anxiety. Fear for retribution or repercussions, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of the unknown. What would happen if I left? Where would I go? And the added thing that Ashley had to contend with was a child. And if anyone out there knows, having children and being a parent, particularly a mother, I can only say that because I'm a mother, there is nothing that I would not do for my children. And that includes protecting them. And if that meant having to stay with my abuser so that I was there to protect them, that's what I'd do. And that is called playing the game. You have to do what you have to do in order to keep yourself safe and to keep those ones around you safe. And that's what keeps them there. There's also a lot of people that don't know where to go to ask for help. And the other thing from the Ashley Bannifield trial is the system let her down. The police let her down. The system let her down. Not many people believed her. They saw her compliability as her wanting to participate in the relationship and then cry domestic violence at the end of it. They didn't see it as her conforming and doing what she needed to do to survive. And unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do until you line all of your ducks up in a row and you have everything set, ready to go. Because if they get wind that they are going to lose you, that is a massive trigger. The finality of the end of a relationship is not an option for them. Failure is not an option for them. So I'm not surprised that the day that she was moving out was the day that Doug, her husband, behaviour escalated to become physical, because he's finally realised this is the end. That's it. She's going. And he no longer has that control. So let's watch a bit more, shall we?
Have a child together. But their whirlwind romance started to crumble. The ballet company they started together failed. Soon, their marriage fell apart.
Why did you decide to talk now?
I'm really doing it for other people. Because I know I'm not alone in this. Women all over the country, all over the world, who have gone through or are going through hard situations behind closed doors. Until you have been there, or it's someone that you know and care about, it's not something that you think about.
In text messages submitted as evidence, Doug admitted to shooting a gun in the home, writing, "I shot the gun. How many times did I tell you I was having a nervous breakdown?" And punching their dog after an argument about his daughter. "I punched the dog because you got me so mad, like you wouldn't stop about Eva. Always Eva."
Now that there, perfect example. Getting blamed for everything. Everything is your fault. He kicked the dog because you made him angry. Okay? He shot the gun in the roof out of frustration because you made him angry, because you talked about his daughter. Now, if you're in the middle of an argument and someone shoots a gun into the ceiling, are you going to continue having an argument on that subject in future? No. That's an extreme example, but it's an example of how that works, how that cycle progresses, and it gets compounded upon until you are just basically following orders at the end of the day.
Manipulative, cunning, and abusive man who absolutely insisted on control.
And so on May 6th, I saw that Ms. Benefield had filed a petition for protection against domestic violence. And
things came to a head on September 27, 2020. Doug was helping Ashley load a U-Haul at her mother's house. They were planning on moving to Maryland, with Doug living separately. According to court documents filed by the defense, Ashley says Doug struck her, hitting her on the side of her head, and then tried to keep her from leaving the room. Ashley claims she feared for her life and shot him multiple times in self-defense before running to her neighbor's house.
Home. The defense reading texts from Doug he sent to Ashley within the first month, which say in part, quote, "You haven't seen the warrior side and never want to." Ashley Benefield visibly shaking during parts of her testimony as she says she shot Doug because she was in fear for her life.
Are you scared here of Doug?
No, I would not say.
You said.
Now, this part here is disgusting. I'm sorry. But what the prosecutor has done here has found pictures from her wedding reception where she's smiling and she's saying to Ashley, "Are you scared here? Are you in fear here?" And what she doesn't realise is there are good times. It's not always bad. And those good times are what you live for. You get your way through, you endure the bad times because you look forward to that next really good time. And there will be another because it goes in cycles. It's not a constant thing. And you're at a wedding reception. What is she going to do? Have a full-on tantrum in front of all her family and friends as well? What would that set off when she got home? What repercussions would she have to face when she got home for that behaviour? She's playing the game. She's conforming. She's behaving.
On direct examination that around this time you were living the nightmare. Those were your words, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you living the nightmare here?
Oh, no, not at that moment, no. That was a very nice day.
How about at this moment?
Oh, it was a good day.
And States 102 at this moment?
Same. It was a good day.
During cross-examination, Ashley Benefield says Doug never punched or kicked her, as the state continues to paint Doug as a protective spouse and Ashley Benefield as a jealous stepmom, standing firm in their stance that she wanted sole custody of their daughter and would do anything to make that happen.
She wanted sole custody of her daughter because her daughter had been coming home from her allocated custody visits with her father with injuries. What would you do? Of course you would want sole custody. You know what this person's like. What happens if the court says to you, okay, you've been fighting for sole custody, but we're going to give joint custody, and you have the option of being able to attend that joint custody. So you're able to attend the custody visit with your child. Would you go? Damn bloody straight you would. I know I would. And she did. And they used that against her. The prosecution turned it around to make sure to say that she was not scared of him, obviously, because she went with the child to the custody visit, and that she was obviously still participating in the relationship. Yep.
This case is about a woman who very early on in her pregnancy decided she wanted to be a single mother. When there was no other option, she shoots him and kills him and claims self-defense. In the circuit.
And spoiler alert, this part here is the verdict of the trial.
Court of the 12th Judicial Circuit in and for Manatee County, Florida. The State of Florida versus Ashley Benefield. Case number 2020 CF 3014. Verdict. We, the jury, finds as follows as to the defendant in this case. The defendant is guilty of manslaughter, a lesser included offense.
Yep. You heard it. Guilty of manslaughter. Now, I think a huge injustice has been done, just personally, in my opinion, not only to Ashley, but to the entire domestic violence community. It's a huge setback because people that were thinking of coming forward will think again. They won't be as easily convinced or as confident to leave. And being treated like those prosecutors treated Ashley is absolutely appalling. Absolutely appalling. I 100% believe that she was most definitely a victim of domestic violence, whether you can see bruises or not. But absolutely. And now she is facing up to 30 years in jail. And when she was interviewed, they said before the trial, she was interviewed and she said, she was asked the question, you know, you are facing potentially a long time in jail. Does that concern you? And her answer was, it's preferable. It's more preferable to her to live in jail than it was to be submitted to another minute of living with that man, living that life with him. What does that tell you? I'm sorry, but very disappointed in the system, very angered at the prosecution and their behaviour, and hopefully this doesn't have the ripple effect on other domestic violence victims, because it's hard enough to survive as it is. And we all react differently. We all survive differently. And unless you have been through it, and I hope you never have to, and I hope those that you love never have to, but if you can recognise any of those signs, or you have questions, ask. On the side, quietly, is everything okay? You never know. You might just save someone's life. Thank you for watching. With that, I'm going to say goodnight, and I wish you all love, happiness and safety. Look after yourselves, look after those you love, tell them you love them, and be good to yourself. Bye-bye.